This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. Woo! I say cheering. He puts cheering in the background. I don't know which is more important. Anyway, I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is
Vanessa Valiente.
And our amazing guest today, who Vanessa and the other four horsemen met at Pensacon, is T. Allen.
Hi, how are you? Oh, yes.
I have
Nice.
it right here.
Yes. I've got a copy too in the background here.
Oh,
so
nice.
That was very, very good. So you still have it. That's great.
Of course. It's not like holding my door open or anything. So
Well, good.
Is that a new level we're going to, Vanessa? A book that holds your door open.
I think it's not quite a door stopper. It's not. It's only 600 pages or so. I
Oh
think.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Okay, we're going to talk about what we're drinking before we discuss books that hold Vanessa's door open. That'll be a new segment on Drinking with Authors. Okay, I am super excited about this, and I made my boyfriend go to the store with me yesterday because I found this a little while ago, and I was like, this could be great or could be complete crap, but I love it. And it's Angry Orchard mango, a peach mango.
Oh,
it's hard fruit cider, and it's so ridiculously yummy. Vanessa, you had it when you were over here, right?
Yes, I'm jealous that you're drinking that right now.
What are you drinking, Vanessa?
Just vodka soda. Nothing as fun as that one.
Okay, by default. Yeah, out of our Drinking with Authors swag that you will also get as well, Thad, just so you know, because we think everyone should have solo cups and shot glasses. It's on our show.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Thad, what are you drinking?
I actually have Viking Blood, which
Ooh.
is it's mead. So I'm a pretty novice drinker actually, which is kind of weird, but I drink very little. But what I do like, unlike you, I like sweet stuff. So I like it to taste good. I don't like the stuff that I gotta drink and I'm like, oh, that was, I'm not that guy. So if I'm going to sip at something, I want it to taste kind of good. So I'm a big mead fan. I like my wines. I don't like them terribly dry, and I like my rum spiced. So
I think these are all taglines. I like my mead yummy. I like my wine sweet, and I like my rum spiced. Like I like my women.
Yeah, definitely spicy on the women. But, my wife's a redhead, so.
I totally feel you. Before my hair decided to turn this color, I was a redhead too. Trust me, my boyfriend feels your pain. Okay, so let's talk about what you write for those that maybe don't know.
Okay, so I'm a sci-fi and fantasy writer, and I write kind of a lot of hybrid stuff, but I typically write dark. It's gritty. I have a detective noir that takes place on the moon in Lunatic City. I have a espionage cyberpunk in Hard Rain, and I have my epic fantasy, which is War of the Gods, and it's on the darker side. It's much more Game of Thrones than Lord of the Rings, and I have an epic space opera also that is a little bit. All of it's darker, all of it's kind of edgier and grittier, kind of a feel, more of a Battlestar Galactica feel in my sci-fi.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. And which one were you holding up, Vanessa? You were holding up
War of the Gods.
Yes.
So that's the high fantasy series.
Yes. Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
I borrow a lot from history actually. So like I'm a sci-fi writer, I'm a fantasy writer, but I borrow very liberally from history. I'm a huge history buff. So I borrow from the American Revolution, from the American Civil War. I borrow, especially when I'm doing sci-fi stuff, I'll borrow from like World War II or like some people who've read my stuff will see the Tet Offensive or echoes of the French and Russian Revolution in some of my stuff. So I borrow from quite liberally from history.
That is very cool. But You were a fighter.
Yes.
Let's go back in time. I like the time travel we can do on this show. Let's go back in time. You were
Yes.
a firefighter. So how did you go from firefighter to epic writing huge, gigantic books author? Like, how did that we've never had that leap discussed on this show. So how did that leap occur?
No, it's not much of a leap. So I grew up kind of I always was kind of a romantic, and I was always kind of absorbed in, I always liked writing. I always liked the craft of writing. I always liked studying how, oh, well, this is foreshadowing. And this is what they call thematic consistency. And this character is changing and developing. And these are the tools, And so I always was interested in that. But at my heart, I really was attracted to the fire department. And I was attracted to it because at my heart, I also like military. I was always a big military guy. I'm a military history buff. And so one of the reasons that I got into the fire department was because I didn't want to be told, hey, yeah, you're going to Germany. No, I'm not going to Germany. But I wanted a career that gave me that same kind of accomplishment or sense of accomplishment. And people like firemen more than they like cops. So I went into the fire department, and I spent 25 great years doing that. And about the time I got hired in 96 with Pasco, and then Hillsborough in 2000, I moved over. And about the time I did that, I started Priscina Reign, which was an epic dark fantasy, largely influenced by the French and Russian Revolution. A lot of its politics are a lot more present day than I would like today. Let's put it that way. So I started working on that. I worked on it for like 12 years, and I just played with it and did it. And I wrote a sequel. And then I found out about this self-publishing thing, which I didn't jump on right away, because even though I was interested in writing, I was a firefighter, and at the time I was a driver, I wanted to be a captain. And, that's a whole discipline that really kind of, when you're in that life, you're in that life. And that is it. That's what you do. That's what you are. So it wasn't until I started to wind down my career that I really started to give a lot more attention to writing. And I said, I really think I want to do this. So I started pursuing that as my career started to wind down, and yeah, it was great. It was a fantastic. It's been great. Both of them. I love both. I love both careers, and I really, really enjoy being a writer. But I wouldn't give up being a fireman or firefighter for anything.
How come you haven't written about firefighting or a firefighting character? I'm just curious, because if you've done it for so long, you really know you'd have the correct voice of that, right? Because you actually know, versus people who write firemen. In a lot of sexy novels, I don't think we go very far into the fireman thing, other than they're a fireman and they're sexy because they're a fireman, and there's calendars with firemen on them. But how come you haven't written about that?
Well, there's two reasons, and one of them is, as a firefighter, I didn't really want to go there while I still worked as a firefighter, if that makes sense. And so, and my interests really as a firefighting character, it was really, I had a hard time finding the interest, like my sci-fi and fantasy interest and my roots. It's really hard to find that. Now, I will say, people have told me that my most natural voice is probably Frank Parker in Lunatic City, who is a cop. He's a noir character, right? It's basically noir on the moon. And Frank Parker is, they say, my most authentic voice. And I suspect that is because I'm not a cop, but I'm a cousin, right? So I think some of the insights that you get into those kind of characters can come through, and you can still do those characters without being a firefighter per se. You can still paramilitary. You can get some of that military feel too out of that culture. The cultures are very similar. So I think that I haven't because of that reason, but it has benefited me in some of my writings and some of my characters, if that makes any sense. It's kind of a rambling way to do that.
No, and I love, that's what we do as authors, we ramble.
Yep.
But I love that, because I think one thing that's, as you were talking about it too, but I was trying to think back to how many stories that I've seen with firefighters versus cops, even whether it's a cop noir series or whatever. There's not a lot of series. I'm just planting a seed. I'm just saying you write a really
Well,
dark series with firefighters, and
to be honest, I don't really want to talk about it too much in a public setting yet. But yeah, I actually have given some thought to that. I do want to do that, but that means getting a new pen name and a new identity, because I'm a sci-fi and fantasy writer. And if you're going to be an indie writer, you have to keep your also bought separate. So I'm going to have to create a completely new author identity to write firefighting books. And I do want to do that. I do want to do that in the context of, we'll do that in the context of a mystery. We'll just put it that way. And so I do eventually want to go down that road, but I'm trying not to spread myself too thin, because I would have thought that retirement would have been, woohoo, I have nothing but time. But what ends up happening, to be honest with you, a lot of the structure in my life is completely gone now. You know, every third day I had to be at the fire department. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Now it's like, you would think that, oh, well, I have nothing but time, but then all these honeydews come up and these other things go on, and kids need you over here and go over there, and you're like, man, I kind of nappish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll take me a nap, and then the next thing you know, your day's gone, and you've maybe written 500 words for the day, and you've not really met any of your goals. So I'm finally getting a schedule wrestled out of my day. I'm finally getting the discipline down. We've kind of had some of the mishap that we've had, so some of that's been part of that whole retirement, losing track of life thing. And I'm getting a schedule set up. And once I'm able to do that and I can start producing enough product and getting enough output, then I'll start worrying about adding to my plate. But right now my plate is pretty full. So
I have a question, because
Sure.
I always like learning about other people's process on like scheduling.
Mhm.
And how do you, like, right now, I know you're still trying to find your way on that, but like how are you determining that? Are you just setting a block of time, or are you saying my day's not complete unless I write a certain amount of words? Like how do you schedule your book time, especially with the deadline?
So what I do is, that's a good question. And I think it's a question that a lot of people wrestle with. So I'm a firm believer that if you're going to be a pro in this business, you've got to sit down and make the time and have the discipline and do all the things that comes along with being a pro, right? So what I do is I get up in the morning. I'm an early bird, not by design. I used to be a night owl, but somewhere in my middle age, I've become a much less of an early bird and much more of a morning person, right? So I'm out of bed at 5:30, 6 at the latest, right? Now my daughter, I do take her to work sometimes. She's a 6 o'clock in the morning girl. So she's at work at 6 in the morning. She may also, by the way, come by here in a few minutes when she gets off work. That's not my fault. So she gets me up sometimes, and I take her. And what I traditionally do then is, when I'm up, I sit in front of the computer and I start making the donuts, right? The old Dunkin' Donuts. You remember? I don't know if you remember. Time to make the donuts. So you get out of bed, you make the donuts, and I try to do that. I will say that yesterday, my wife will tell you, it was a pain. No, not yesterday. The day before yesterday was a painful writing day, but I think you need those. You go there and you stare at the computer, and then you go sit on the couch, and then you're looking at your phone and you're thinking, how am I going to get from point A to point B? How do I do that? And even if you don't solve those answers, at least you're spending the time mulling it over. And then I woke up the next morning and I was 500 words deep at 7 o'clock in the morning. So but you got to do it. You got to put the time down. So, okay. So my wife is going to get my daughter now. So they are going to come back through here. So, and the dogs may make some noise.
We have guests that come in. Sometimes they're.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you put the dogs back in the room? I don't care. They won't be in this room barking. Okay. I also have furry beasts that may make some noise in the next room, but at least they won't be in here because.
Again, we were doing an interview the other day, and he's like, "I'm just going to warn you about my cat," and we're like, "Oh, that's okay." And literally, the cat was like, hello, let me just like, and I mean, but not even like a little bit, like a little tail, like, no, it was like full screen coverage of cat. And then the cat pushed the laptop over, like it was full on, like you could tell, and he was trying to maintain his composure. It was completely hysterical because he's trying to seriously talk about it.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden you'd see the tail flick and then all this, some chaos would happen with it. So
I'm cool. This is normal. Can you hear them?
Oh yeah,
fine.
but it's all
It's
good.
fine. Don't worry.
All right. He does his job though. People
Yeah,
do not
no,
come near the
totally.
house. And he's,
So-
yes. Do you have a question?
I do. So romantic, whatever. Your first book was the Rain series, correct?
No,
Rain
no.
series.
Rain is my latest series. Forgive me as I pull.
Oh,
It. Rain is my latest series. My first series was was the Priscina Crusade, or the Priscina Trilogy, and it's a trilogy. It's an epic, dark battle. I call it Battlestar Galactica meets Les Mis.
oh,
So it's a very French or Russian style revolution set in a future where there's a ruled by a corporate aristocracy, and it's a three. Obviously, it's 3 parts, but I don't like to give too much away because it's kind of generational. It's kind of a little different. It's not the same characters. I make different characters in each series, in each installment. So I follow that family.
that is very cool. So when was your first book published? Where are we beginning here?
So the beginning, I actually would have to check, but I think 2012 is about right. I was indie published. Originally, I called it Killer Penguin Entertainment after my son. That was the name of my publishing house then. And I wrote a few books under that. Lunatic City made it. So I think it would have been book 1 and 2 of the Priscina Trilogy. And then Lunatic City came right after that. And then it gets even fuzzier beyond that, especially as I drink this stuff. So
No, that's okay. I don't have to remember dates because I'm the host, so I'm drinking. Why did you go self-publishing? What made you decide to choose that route or create your own publishing company but self-publish?
So that's a really good question, and the answer is I tried the traditional route for a long, long time. I sent in stuff while I was. I sent in stuff probably at the end of probably the end of the 2010, like the 2000s, towards 2010. I was actually querying publishers like in 2005, 2006, and they would keep it, and then they would send me back. You'd send the letter, and you do all the stuff, and they would send me back a letter. Thanks, but no thanks. We like your book, but not that much. And I don't really know how much they liked it. There was one tour, I think it was, kept it for 9 months before I got a no, which they told me, oh, that means you made it through some of the layers of which I don't know if that's true or not. But I did try. And I finally, my wife, my lovely redheaded wife, is the one who said, look, man, I've been reading this article about Amazon, and I think you should just go ahead and take your stuff and do that. And so that's really what started that I'm going to say 2012. And then, like I said, then I started working on the sequels and stuff at that point. So that's
I have to say it's interesting because yours is the story that I hear a lot, in a way, of why people went the self-publishing route, because there weren't any doors that opened. I think, we have this idea of what that's like, of submitting your work and doing that whole thing. And it's very hard because you want it to get out there. You want your and it's not even so much, I think, we're all expecting $1 million contract from Random House, it's, we would like our work out there. And when it doesn't, you got to go. I think a lot of people don't necessarily go, screw it, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Especially back then, because that's when self-publishing was a little bit newer.
Yeah.
Still had a little bit of a dirty feel to it at the time. Not that it's 100% clean at this point, but I mean, it's much, at that time, it was much more like, oh, you're just putting crap out if you're self-publishing.
Well, and actually, I still, even after the 2000s, I did still pursue publication. I actually was published. I guess technically I'm hybrid. I was published. Lunatic City did get optioned by um, Kevin Anderson, but his company, Wordfire Press. Kevin Anderson owns Wordfire Press. I actually was a Wordfire writer, and I eventually bought out my contract because I wanted the chance to manage myself. They treated me great. I have no complaints about them. In fact, Kevin was nothing but a gentleman. But when I asked to buy myself out of the contract, he was nothing but a gentleman. He worked with me. He was great. Dave Butler was a acquisitions editor at the time. So those are all fond memories. So I did go that route, but I really wanted to be able to manage it myself. And I eventually bought into the fact that no one believes, and again, it's no knock on anybody else, but no one believes in you like you, right? Nobody's going to sell Thad Diaz, T. Allen Diaz, like T. Allen Diaz. And I think that, if you have a bad luck or bad streak, a lot of these publishing houses, and it's nothing personal, there's too many people out there. They've got X amount of slots. And if you blew your shot, you come out, you go in, and that's the end of that. And so, and I don't blame them for that. That's the business model. And but I would rather retain the control and be the guy. And I don't have to change stuff that they think doesn't work. If my stuff is a little too dark for them, that's okay. I'm doing my own stuff. So it gives me more control, and I don't think I have all the answers or that I know it all. I do not believe that. I think that you're foolish to think that. But those are kind of my reasoning behind why I eventually shifted away from the traditional angle, and I've gone with the self-publishing,
So
the indie publishing.
I have to ask. So basically, once you become an indie publisher, you kind of wear multiple hats.
Oh, yeah.
You're the marketer, you're the editor in a sense. Like, do you hire, outside people to do your covers and your editing, and like what's like your process? Do you work with different people depending on the project, or do you have someone that you consistently work with? Like, what's your relationship and with those people?
I have an editor. I've had a couple of editors, but I have right now. Always seen it. Aisha Rem is my editor. If she's watching this and I mispronounced it, I'm sorry, but I've only seen it spelled. So Aisha's my editor. She does a fantastic job. I love working with her. She's very familiar with my stuff. Before her, I had a really great editor in Maya Cleve. She was nothing but great. At the time, though, I was priced out of. I couldn't make that work. Aisha is fantastic. She does great work. We have a great relationship. She's very cool. I have deadlines. I miss deadlines a lot more than I'd like to, but I'm working on. I'm doing a lot better, and I think I am. Aisha might argue, but I think I'm doing a lot better now. But it is tough. And if you are watching this, Aisha, you probably already know because I think these are delayed. But I think I'm on time for book 4, Rain book 4. But anyway, woohoo! So yeah, the other thing, I work with a guy named Alvin Epps, who's a fantastic cover artist. He's done almost all of my stuff. He did Lunatic City. He did Hard Rain. He did my Priscina covers, which they're not behind me. I only had so much room. And I also work with Stuart Bache across the pond to do my War of the Gods. Again, that is not a reflection on Alvin Epps. It's a reflection on me. Alvin does exactly what I ask him to, but my eye for that particular genre sucks. And you've got to understand that when you ask somebody for a product and they give it to you, well, then you got to pay them, and it's not their fault that it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because I don't have the eye. So Stuart Bache is an actual cover designer. He designed that cover. That cover really, really works for the genre, and I highly recommend him, just as I recommend Alvin Epps. Now, these others have worked because they're pulpier. They've got kind of got they're a little easier cover for me, the simpleton that I am in that particular to manage. But Yeah, I think that going with a cover, that in effect, I have personal loyalty. Alvin Epps has been with me from the beginning, and I'm a very personally loyal guy. So as long as I can as long as I can continue to do business with Alvin, I will do that. Just on general principle, as long as it doesn't hurt my business model, and it does not. He does excellent work, and I think those covers are fantastic, and they sell very, very well.
Absolutely. And they sell very, very well. Part of the whole thing with covers, and I think a lot of people don't get this, and what you just said is so, so true. There are covers that work with genres. It's great you want to genre bend, and you can absolutely genre bend. But what does the audience expect to see, and how far can you bend it that it's still that audience and they can recognize the book in front of them? And if they can't, because we are at a point, and people used to go, I go into bookstores and if I like the cover, I pick up the book. That doesn't necessarily work digitally. In your little 1x1.5, whatever the little thumbnail that you get, it does not work to say they're going to pick up the book. They're going to look at the cover and go, does that look like something I would want to read? And if not, they're going to move on.
Right.
It's so that simple now,
Right.
You get a very limited elevator pitch to any audience out there. And if you do not nail that cover, I don't care if it was a picture from a time when you were writing the book and it meant something to you and blah, 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 blah. But if it's a horror book and you have a little girl running in a field with a flower in her hand, unless you make that cover very dark and macabre, then you're not gonna go, that's a horror book. People are gonna think it's like a life inspiration book or something like that, right?
Right. There are tropes that they
sell.
Well, also, I think it has to do also looking at books that are coming out today, because I think a lot of the times people tend to fall in love with a book that they read years and years and years ago, and they're going based off of an old variant cover. And sometimes those covers no longer work in the current marketplace, and you have to tweak that. Like, I'm sure, I think like George R. R. Martin has gone through so many different covers because he's been writing for decades. So what he used when Game of Thrones first came out versus today are not going to be the same covers that are going to attract the same audience that he's trying to target. Just like, Stephen King, their covers change. So sometimes you even have to go with what is going today and not what was happening several decades ago in that genre.
100%. And that actually is also true of foreign markets. If you do a foreign book, a lot of times they will run different covers because of the cultural differences of those countries, and they will expect different tropes, different appearances. Otherwise, you won't convey with your American cover in Germany what you want. Now, I don't have the good fortune of having a translation yet, but it's on the list. But to follow up on something that you said, I actually did that. Like, one of my favorite books when I was teens going into my 20s, late teens, early 20s, the Timothy Zahn books came out, the Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
And
I actually just talked to him at Tampa Bay Comic-Con. We were just there. And anyway, but he's amazing.
He's one of the few authors I've actually fanboyed over, and my wife thought it was adorable. But I was like, oh my God, it's Timothy Zahn. He is such a cool dude. I've seen him several times now, and I still get a little bit like fanboyish around him because I love the guy. He's fantastic. But his writing, his books, those 3 books, I consider canon. I'm sorry, but I love those Thrawn books. And the Heir to the Empire, they had a very specific look in my day, and they had Leia and the different characters, and you could kind of see them looking off in the distance. And then they had some action sequences at the bottom. I emulated that in 2010 when I did my covers. But guess what? Those covers were 20 years old. So it didn't work, so I said my late teens, early 20s, but that was early 90s. So, those covers are going on 20, those covers are going on 20 years old. So my stuff was dated from day one. I had to completely redo those covers, and boy, that was an expensive lesson, but that's okay. That's what the business, I love the craft. I love doing what I'm doing. So it's fine with me.
I have to say, one of the first books I ever picked up was The Veil of the Vole by Pierce Anthony, and it's part of the Xanth series. And I'm actually very fortunate that Pierce Anthony's agreed to allow us to do a podcast recording as soon as COVID is over. And I'm waiting because I do not want to give Pierce Anthony COVID, because I'm not going to be responsible for the death of Pierce Anthony. Things that will not happen this lifetime. So, but if you look at the Veil of the Volt cover, it's cheesy. They're little cheesy characters and stuff like that. The book I still have from when I got it back then. It's true with the Chronicles of Narnia. The original Chronicles of Narnia covers were very campy, cheesy. That's the genre back then. And I think it's important, the lesson before we take our required commercial break here, that authors can get from this is, whether it's your publication company, it's kind of your responsibility. Take a look at what other people in the genre or closest genres are publishing that are selling books. We're not 100%. Saying copy them, but no, they're selling books. You want it to look similar. You want it to be that somebody can look at your book and their book and recognize it's that genre. This is the kind of story. This is what you're telling. And it's not a slight on you. And we love all your creative inferences that you want to put in your thing. But when it comes down to it, you will never have readers if you don't sell your damn book. So figure out how to sell your damn book. It's that simple.
Yep, that's 100% correct. Yep.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back with Drinking with Authors.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, talk about your deconstructed characters. We went on a break and we've been drinking, and we should have started recording again. Go ahead.
Okay, so we were talking bad about Walter White, or I was anyway. And so we were talking about deconstructing characters. And I was just saying that as a writer, I think it's important that, you know, you like or be interested in the characters that you're writing, and finding a way to make them interesting to the reader is important. That's the craft. But one of my characters, Leo Krasinski, who is the baddie in Priscina Rain, my first book, I tried to make him cool. He's the one villain that I tried to make kind of, I want you to like this guy. You don't really like him. You just want to think you like him. So which I hate mob movies, by the way, but he's a mobster. He's a mafioso. And he ends up being appointed corporate security by the real heavy. He's like the henchman, you know, so Leo, though, he's very urbane, he's very sophisticated, he smokes cloves, cigarettes, he wears this kind of fancy outfit, and I kind of I actually made him a bit of a POV character, and which is something I haven't done since then. I really haven't made my villains, for the most part, POV. I'm not going to give anything away on that. So, but I haven't made too many of my villains POV characters, but I really enjoyed writing him, and I really enjoyed making him this guy that does these terrible things. He does them on the page, and people tell me, I love him, and I'm like, yeah, he's cold-blooded psychopathic killer, but yeah, I get it. I get it. It was a lot of fun writing him. I enjoyed him. He was a lot of fun.
Well, I always want to know, why is it that we like the villain, like Loki? I think of Loki for some reason. You can't help, like, he does really bad things, but yet I still want him to, like, I'm still rooting for him. Like, I get upset when he doesn't succeed, yet some of his goals are not, you know, good. I want to know, like, why do we like villains? You know, what makes us, like, kind of root for them in a way?
Drinking, and then you ask that question. Okay, God, why do you think we like villains?
I think we like villains because they remind us of a very real part of our personality. I think there's we're going to be deep and philosophical about this.
Okay.
But I do. I think that we as people have some darker edges to our personality, to our existence. We do live in a pretty dark world sometimes. It can be pretty bad. And I think that they have this kind of subconscious appeal because of that. We like the fact that they don't live by the rules we do. They do their own thing, and damn it, that's okay. and they're okay with that. And I think that appeals to us for that very reason. That's just my armchair psychology, but that's what I truly think.
I think it's true. I think also is you take Loki as a character, and Loki is comically evil and still has some parts that you see humanity with them, versus you take on a character like there was a character in Sword of Truth that was a lead bad guy, and he was a pedophile. Forget the name of the character now, but he was written with literally no redeeming quality whatsoever.
Right.
And he got tortured and killed in the book, right? And I looked at that and I was so impressed, because I think a lot of times people try to put some, to your Walter White analogy, like, are we supposed to feel sorry for him? Are we supposed to feel bad? Are we supposed to feel empathy for him? The whole time I went, this is a megalomaniac that was hiding under the fact that he had failed in life. And then the moment he got any taste of success in his world, right, became a completely different person. He proved to us over and over again that he put himself, literally himself, not even his family, even though he said his family all the time, but he put himself above everybody else. And I think when you can do that in art and really show that part of a character, I think it's amazing. And I think a lot of us, do have that part where we think if just this one other thing had happened, we would be down that dark path.
Right. But for the grace of God, go I.
Yeah, exactly. Like this one part of humanity turned off. I write serial killers. I'm writing a series on serial killers, and I don't even want to discuss how many notes I have on different serial killers and how they kill people and stuff like that. It's kind of ridiculous. I've told all my friends, if I get arrested, please bring these journals in, because it's going to explain a lot. But I look at it and I go, these guys are very methodical. And the reason a lot of serial killers don't get caught for a long time is they're very methodical and they don't have that humanity aspect to them.
Right.
Right.
And they have no connection to the villain.
Untouchable, because if you have that humanity aspect, you're going to get caught, because there's a degree of you actually think you're doing something wrong, versus when somebody writes a truly good bad guy, the truly good bad guy thinks they're doing the right thing, or their view is right, or whatever. They're not like, what is it, Batman? Some people just want to watch the world burn, right? They're not stealing the rubies to take the rubies. It's just because they can and destroy this whole thing.
It's part of the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your heroes for a moment. Well, actually, I'm going to go back a thing. Yay, having many drinks. Let's talk about your inspiration. Where do you feel like a lot of your ideas come from?
So most of my ideas are pulled right out of history. Most of my, I'm a voracious reader of all things, but I am a huge military history buff. I'm a huge Civil War buff. I like Napoleon, thus, War of the Gods. I am very, very interested in human conflict, even though I don't want to live through one. So I draw a lot from that. I draw a lot from the political tensions that you see as a reoccurring theme in history. I draw a lot from military campaigns that you see in history. I draw a lot from historic figures. As a matter of fact, some of my characters, especially in War of the Gods, I go, yeah, I'm going to take some of this guy and a pinch of that guy and some of this chick over here. And I'm going to put all these, and that's what, and I'm really kind of doing some of that. And maybe in retrospect, people may figure some of that out. Of course, I do my own thing. I'm not trying to make my own, I'm not trying to just make a historical allegory or anything, but I am, I do borrow very, very, very liberally from history. And so that's where I get a lot of my inspiration, pop culture. I walked out of a movie one day and I said, you know what? I like that idea, but I think I can, I know this sounds, I think I can do a better job. So War of the Gods is partially that also. So War of the Gods is really, if you can't tell, it's a passion project of mine. It is absolutely my favorite child. There's no disputing it. And I'm very delighted that the read-through is going up on that. So it keeps me motivated. So, but yeah, that's where I got most of it. I do have an anecdotal story that actually Prosithian Rain literally came from a dream. That actually did happen. It's the only time it's ever happened. But I actually drew inspiration from her, from that story, from literally from a dream.
That's very cool. Do you have audiobooks?
I do. I need to finish the Lunatic City series as an audiobook. I've got all but the last one. But again, being a private, being my own guy, all those expenses come out of my pocket. So I've got to front end the money, put the money on the front end, and then and I have done pretty well on my book sales, but they're expensive to put together. That's an expensive production for me to do. So I have books 1 through 3 of Lunatic City, but not book 4.
Do you listen to a lot of audiobooks?
I listen to a ton of audiobooks. I listen to whenever I'm doing something. I'm either listening to a podcast. If I'm not writing, I write with music, but if I can't listen to a book and write a book, I wish I was that talented, but I can't. But otherwise, I'm listening to a book. So that's usually what I'm doing.
I think that's very cool. So you published the books, you've done this whole thing. Do you write short stories? Because your books seem very thick.
Not all of them, actually. Some of my Lunatic City and Hard Rain, they're actually very pulpy. So I kind of have a pretty good variety. But I do actually have some short stories. I have Hero of Sticks in the Chris Kennedy collection of the Four Horsemen universe. I'm very proud of that. Chris Kennedy is a cool dude. I really wish I'd have hung out with that crowd a little bit more. I kind of slipped away a little bit. I'm on the out, not outs, like they're not mad at me or anything, but I just kind of, you stop swimming in that stream and they've gone down the stream. I kind of wish I'd have hung out with those guys a little bit more. But what a great universe to write in. I wrote in also another guy named John Holmes. I don't know if that's his actual JF, I think is his initials.
I was going to say John Holmes. That's a completely different genre, but
yes, not that John Holmes. I assume that's why he uses JF. But I was in his 100 Worlds, and I think I have a military sci-fi short story in his. I know I do. Wolf at the Door. I have Wolf at the Door and The Witch written by him, and The Witch is a code name, it's not a fantasy. It's actually a short story, the military sci-fi short story, and very proud of both of those. Very proud of being in both of those universes. It's been a blast.
Let's talk about your fans for a little bit. Oh, sorry, Vanessa, you had a question.
No, I have a question because I want to go back to your research because I love research as well and history.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like?
I feel like you're gone. Where did you go?
And she disappeared. You gotta love technology. Vanessa will be back as we continue recording.
I have faith that she will return.
She will return. I know for a fact she will, as soon as she realizes that she's gone. That's fun. I wonder if she's still asking the question though. But I'm going to ask my question now. Let's talk about your fans for a little bit.
Sure.
So with your fans, what was your first fan experience? Like the very first time somebody was like, "Oh my God, I love your book."
So I was at I can't remember which show it is. Not sure why, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea why you couldn't remember things.
But no. So I was at a show. I think it was Tampa Bay Comic-Con. And if not, it was Pensacon. It was a Florida con because it's basically what I do. And I was at the con, and I had written this young woman comes up to me, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're here! You have another Lunatic City." She had loved Lunatic City, and she just went on and on and on about how happy she was just that. Oh my God, I want. And I think at the time I had only one Lunatic City available. One, like I had the second one, and so she took the second one, and she was just over the moon, and it was really cool. It was really a neat thing, and I really enjoyed that. And I've had since then. I've had other stuff. I've had some others that was my first, but I've had a few that were kind of like. I always want to call him Casey. It's not Casey, I don't think. I have a. Yeah, So, but I have had now, I get people that will follow me from con to con to con, and I do have people that are on my email list that actually correspond with me, like pen pal style. So it's really, really cool. I really enjoy all of that. It's all very cool.
That is, I think it's amazing to have fans. And then, I mean, for us, I think as authors, when we hit that point where we've made a huge difference to somebody, you know what I mean? Like you have that moment where you're like, oh my God, I had that first fangirl moment. And I was like, when she came up, because I was actually, for me, I was doing a writing workshop, right? And then all of a sudden, and I was, because I have two different pen names. I have one that I write my erotica under, and I have one that I write my horror under, because it's not horror erotica and
Right.
You know, humorous erotica, and people would be mad.
Also books, yes.
And I was talking under my Erica Lance, right? I was doing the whole thing, and then we were talking, and she something I said, and it was in the middle, and there's all these people around the table, and she's like, "Wait, you're Dahlia Lance?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I was just continuing, and she's like, "You wrote blah?" And like she just went to a whole epic fangirl moment, and I was like, "Cool." And it was weird because I wasn't ready for it, almost like, you know, when you're at a convention booth or something, right. Not that we're ready for it, like we're expecting people to come lavish us with accolades,
right?
But there is a moment that you're like, oh my God, that just happened. Like she loved the story so much that, and it was kind of adorable. But what kind of feedback do you get from your fans?
I get mostly fantastic feedback, which makes me very happy. So like I have an email list, and I communicate with a lot of people from like all around the world. I have a beta readers,
okay,
and they are, you know, the humility, but to be honest with you, they say some very, very flattering things. Some of those guys and gals, they write some really nice things, you know, like oh man, I love these aspects. Like one guy was telling me, you know, we were talking about a character, and I'm notorious for killing my characters off. So he's like, I love this character that you know, and I'm like, oh, that's good. That's not going to work out for you. But so he tells, but one thing he tells me that I thought was a really cool compliment is he says to me, he says, hey, what I really, hello.
This is J.M. Paquette. Vanessa's in. We're having technical difficulties. She gets so many hosts. I had her join in because Vanessa's computer died. You stay right there, Jen. This is T. Allen. He was talking to me about fan stuff. We're in. But finish what you were saying.
So welcome back. So he says, you know, one of the things that I like about you, because he was talking about a villain, and he said, one of the things that I like about your characters is they're real people. They have real motivations, you know, and I really, that was really some good feedback, and I really enjoy. It's good to hear that, you know. Sometimes I'd like people to go, well, you know, this would make your stories better. I want that too, but it is nice to hear people say, you know, that character really connected with me. I really enjoyed that character, and your character, you know, that guy was really real to me, and that means a lot. I mean, because that, as a writer, that tells me maybe I'm doing something right, you know. So yeah. So,
and now that we have 3 hosts, this has never happened, so you should feel super special. Internet things. I just pinged. I was like, Vanessa's gone. Not sure what's happening. Jump in. But you know, when we're talking about fans too, and you were just talking about accolades, how have you found finding beta readers? Because one of the things is you can find a ton of people that will read your book and will go, I liked it, or you know, whatever. But like true, hi, I'm going to tell you the things I did like. Here's your list. How are the things I didn't like?
The answer to that question is, it is tough. And to me, it's kind of, I don't want to say you take what you get, because it sounds very, these people are taking their time to read your book and offer criticism. And I think sometimes they probably are a little reluctant to offer stinging, biting, your plot sucks, this is bad, that's a problem. Um, and I understand that. And I just accept that as, all right, I I gotta just understand that most of these people are gonna be gentle, even though I don't want them to be, and I tell them not to be. But they do still give you insights. They do still give you things. And of course, you've got a developmental editor that you're paying that is a little less, she's still kind, but she is a little less reserved about saying, hey, yeah, this plot thing here, yeah, this sucks. You got to fix that. So I'm okay with that, right? So, everybody kind of fills their roles. And so a lot of times I see beta readers as punch out work, like the punch out people, right? They read your stuff. If they've got any glaring inconsistencies, they're going to tell you. I've had a couple of guys. I've had some folks, like a guy from across the pond, and I put hush puppies on someone's plate, and he goes, I thought they had shoes on their plate because I guess over there they don't have hush puppies. I have no idea. So you will occasionally get those kind of cultural things and those sort of things. But I think you're right. I think a lot of times there's a lot of hesitancy on their part because they're like, ooh, I don't want him to not, I don't want to not be on his team anymore, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they just feel bad criticizing. But you get some definite value out of it. You take the value you get, and you just appreciate what they do for you.
How do you feel about reviews?
I love reviews, and as long as they're not malicious. I've actually had Amazon remove one malicious ad or one malicious review. It was clearly malicious. We'll just put it that way. He mentioned me by name, and we got into a discussion on Facebook that he didn't agree with my opinion, and so he copy and pasted my opinion as a review, and he doxed me by name, which is, I think, how I was able to get it removed, because at first they weren't going to remove it, but then they did remove it because I said, hey, he specifically uses my name, and that is not that's not cool. And so they were like, okay, we removed it for you. And, look, man, as long as if you don't like my stuff, look, my stuff's not for everybody. It's dark. It's, maybe you don't like my prose. Maybe you don't like my characters. I'm fine with that. It's not for everybody. If you think you're going to be for everybody, you're not doing it. To be completely honest with you, you can't have an honest voice as an author and appeal to everybody. It's impossible. There are people who are going to go, that, I've heard people say about George Martin, who I think is a great writer, and they're like, that guy's too gloomy. And I'm like, yeah, isn't he great? But that's the point, is it just doesn't work for everybody's not the same. And the old adage, if everybody's thinking the same way, somebody's not thinking. And so it's the same way with art. Some people just aren't going to like it. That's fine. I'm lucky. I've gotten mostly positive reviews. I've gotten some really good reviews, and I take them all, hopefully, in stride.
And I think you have to. Again, to your point, reviews are a lot of times for readers and not necessarily for the author. I think, like, I tell new authors that get, I'm going to use the word vexed, mainly because I haven't used it yet today, but vexed by their reviews, that they and I'm like, then stop reading your damn reviews. Like, unless it has something in it that says, listen, they kept switching tenses, and you see 3 reviews that say that, maybe you might need to take a look at something about your damn book, right? If 3 reviews say that. But if they didn't like it or whatever, to your point, not everybody's going to like everything. I kill characters. None of my horror books have a happy ending. 0 of them. None of them. There's jokes for people who go to my readings and stuff that goes, okay, somebody's going to die. Okay, there it is. Because I kill characters off, kind of like, to your point, what you do, right? Not like I go out of my way, but that's the nature of how I tell the story. It's a horror story, and it ends badly. Like, it doesn't end well. And when people are like, well, I like happy endings, probably don't read my stuff then. You are going to be very disappointed every single time you do, because there isn't a single happy ending in any of it, right? So I think you do have to find the readers for you too, and you can be 100 people and none of them may be your readers.
Right, and I think you're 100% right, and I think that like for me, I think some of my endings are happier, but there's always a price to be paid to get there, right? I never liked consequenceless stories. Like, oh, you mean there was never any real threat? You weren't going to ever do anything bad to these
Right.
people?
Well,
I
basically,
never,
like, how everyone just like everything kind of ties into like a nice little bow,
right.
and it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just not realistic.
Right. And like I grew up on Stephen King. That was what I read when I was way too young to be reading Stephen King. And I think that some of that shaped my because Stephen King he's a bastard. He kills everybody. So but yeah, I really I do think it's a matter of finding your readers. And if you get somebody who wants to say, hey, this was trash because I like sunshine and rainbows and this was all rainy days. Okay, I get it. That's cool. And that's nothing personal.
That's what I always say. Thank you for purchasing my book. You put money in my pocket by deciding it wasn't for you. It's funny because Jen, who jumped on, actually is a huge Stephen King fan. I find this ironic, but can't stand a story that doesn't have a happy ending.
Oh, wow. You were disappointed.
On Stephen King's The Stand.
He ruined it for it. No, I love Stephen King, but I know what I'm getting when I read a Stephen King book. So when I find new authors, generally speaking, I read so much depressing stuff. All I want is a happy ending. I want the security that my characters are going to be alive at the end.
She got very, very poisoned by a Drizzt book early on in her life. R.A. Salvatore, who she actually confronted at a signing about
he was very nice
particular character.
He's a cool dude. I've actually had the privilege of meeting him. He's a cool dude.
He was really nice, but that book where he killed O'Brien, spoiler alert, guys, it came out like 25 years ago.
I don't think I've read any of his stuff.
That series, it was the Pony and O'Brien, and I didn't really like Pony from the beginning. I was like, that's fine, I can deal with her because really O'Brien's the hero. And then he kills O'Brien by making him slip off of a roof, and then the villain comes up and guts him. I was like, are you kidding me? You just knocked your hero off a roof and had okay, all right, so now it's her story.
This is what we're doing now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question earlier, and my lovely internet told me, no, you're not allowed to ask this question.
You were nixed on the question.
I want to re-tackle. I'm going to try one more time. So, you heavily do research. Now, do you go into a story when you're starting something new with the intent of, your one story is Les Mis meets Battlestar Galactica. Did you go in, okay, I want to talk about the French Revolution when you started it? Or was it something that kind of organically as you were writing the story, you were like, well, there's something about this that kind of makes me think of the French Revolution. Like, is it something that you just came up with as you started writing, or you knew prior to starting?
No, from day one, I knew it was going to be a haves versus have-not struggle. And I knew that the Russian and French Revolution were going to be major bulwarks, I guess we would say, of those particular. But I also had some specific themes that I wanted to tackle, like the very nature of militating for others, but the poison nature of the power that gives you when you do that. And so the road to tyranny and some of those things that I actually wanted to look at, and I wanted to take a look at it. And I think I did a pretty good job. I mean, I know it's a little modest, but I was pretty happy with the product, and I was pretty happy with the story. There's nobody in that story. Well, that's not entirely true, but there are a lot more dirty hands than clean hands. And that doesn't really matter on which side of the fence you're talking that these people are on. And that was the look I was going for back then. And I guess really it's kind of the look that I keep, right? That's kind of how a lot of my books work. But yeah, I wanted to go with the concept that of the haves versus the have-nots, and how people who you think are the good guys aren't really the good guys as much as you'd like to think they are. Not that necessarily makes a bad guy as good, but that was my struggle. And my whole point was to put those people in very difficult situations, being caught between these two diametrically opposed forces. And that really, to me, is always the story. It's never about, as much as I borrow from history, I try to never forget that this is a story about characters caught in difficult situations. And that is the power that makes the story go. If I don't have interesting characters that are put in difficult situations, then who cares? You can write, you can that's called world building. You can world build all you want, but if I don't give a flip about your character, I'm not going to read. I'm not going to read 600. I'm not going to read 600 pages of world building. I want to read 600 pages of, wow, these people are going through this really tough time, and I want to see how they get out of it. And I care about these people, right? That's the other trick. That we were talking about Walter White earlier. I don't care about Walter White. I don't care. The guy ends up in prison. Good. He ends up shot. Good. He ends up a millionaire. That sucks, but I really don't want to see that. So I never really got into Walter White because I didn't think he was a particularly interesting or compelling character. Now I know that I'm in the minority, so I understand. So I've heard some feelings out there in the ether, but that's the way I feel.
I don't think you're necessarily in the minority. I think there's a huge fan base. When you have a huge fan base, you hear about it, but I'm quite sure it's not everybody. You look at, for instance, TV shows, and we talk about, like ER was on the air for 12 years. Supernatural was on the air for 15 years. It would have kept going if they just went, yeah, we're done. We're done. Like there's not more of this story to tell. They kind of got to like a point where both the showrunners were like, we're done with this at this point.
Yeah.
Done. But it would have kept going. But you don't hear, Supernatural fans are interesting in and of themselves, but it's interesting when you see a show because Breaking Bad was like 5 or 6 seasons, right? And they also ended the show. So I say that as one who watched it while broken leg. It's
right.
like 5 or 6 seasons, but they ended it. And it kind of ties back, watch how I do this, back to my point earlier about also doing book series where you are still writing and you have a story to tell and you can still do it, versus like kind of forcing a communication through trying to make it interesting again, and you lose the actual story and the characters you were trying to talk about.
Yeah, I think I have learned that particular lesson, I think, as a writer, is having a plan of where your series goes beyond this book and the next book is very important. And I think I got my newer stuff, I think is better at that than my older stuff. And I think that my older stuff had more limited series, and now my newer stuff it's not open-ended, but they're longer tales. But to your point, yeah, I agree 100% that that having a plan is very, very important when it comes to series planning. I really, well, Game of Thrones is a good example, right? They outwrote the books, and I haven't seen it, but there are a lot of people who aren't particularly happy with the way the show ended. And I think that a lot of that is they didn't have a roadmap anymore. That's my opinion, but that's what it sounds like from a distance, because I've read the books, but I haven't watched the movie. I don't know how you or watched the show.
Yeah, no, we watch the show. Don't watch the show. It will just anger you.
Yeah.
Really great parts of it, and they did well with some of the characters, but I feel like they got to the season 8 and either thought they'd have these guys for another 6 seasons or something, so they'd be able to do it, or literally just didn't feel the end was whatever. Season 8 was terrible.
The thing is, it's all about, no matter what you write, is be consistent in what you promise your audience. It doesn't matter if it's a happy ending or not, because let's be real, no one expected the ending of Game of Thrones to be like happy go lucky, like the sun is shining and all that. But it's, to me, the only thing that really angered me was if a character acts out of character, then you've lost me. Right. If they made this huge character change over here, and then at the last minute you just decide, oh, I'm gonna like flip the script just for shock value, then to me that would just fuel my anger. There's no value behind the shock right there. You
have to have internal consistency.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, we actually have to wrap up this episode. So T. Allen Diaz, how do people find you?
TLNdiaz.com. I have a Facebook presence. I have a Twitter presence in theory, but I'm never there. But I do get onto Facebook and occasionally poke around there. I'm most active on my email list, and that you can get on tlndiaz.com. You get some freebies and stuff to be part of my email list, part of my email community. And trying to think, I do. Yeah, that's basically it. Facebook is the big place where I'm the most active, but outside of my email list.
What is your next book that's coming out?
So I've got Hard Rain, the Janissary, which is a story about imagine Salt or Born in a cyberpunk setting, post-apocalyptic cyberpunk setting. She's a badass private agent, and she has kind of amnesia beyond 16 months at the initial start. And she's got to figure out who she is while at the same time taking on these kind of side missions, or not side missions, but these missions that go on. And she eventually she starts to get caught up in her past and in the secret that people have been keeping from her about who she really is and stuff. And so book 3 of the series, book 1 and 2 are already available on Amazon. Book 3 will be available. I'm going to time it. So when you guys tell me this goes live, I'm going to try to do the release because it's done. It's in the can. I'm working on book 4 right now, and I've had some really good. Book 4 was the one I was pulling. Not that I have it now, but I had hair the other day, and when I had that hair, I was pulling it out because I was running into some story issues. But I really think I'm going to have a rough draft, and then maybe even a finished draft by the end of this month. So I'll have another one hopefully to release.
Very cool. I will send you release dates after this, so you know.
Okay. Thank you.
In the next few weeks, but
okay.
You have been thoroughly amazing. Thank you for being on this podcast with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient with my senile ways. So that was very nice of you. I appreciate your graciousness there. So thank you guys very much.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance, and with me today are 2 co-hosts, Vanessa Valiente and J.M. Piquet, and our guest has been T. Allen Diaz, and we will see you guys next time.